recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable podcast. This is podcast number 663. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Matt Longeth. Today is Wednesday, October 4th, 2023. Matt, how are you doing today?
Eric, I am well. Did you happen to get the alert on your phone?
I did. National Alert Day, I guess, just to test things out.
So, I do a little research here, as I often do on these things. And one, I didn't realize this. I want to take a guess of how many cell phones there are in the United States, roughly.
Well, like 200, 320 million population, give or take. I don't know. So maybe 200 million.
380 million by number of cell phone numbers, if Wikipedia is to believe, which is oddly enough, we're still in fourth globally as far as that number. Care to take a guess of who is in front of us as far as number of cell phones deployed?
I have no idea. China, because they've just got a lot of people.
They're in the top slot, but directly in front of us is Indonesia, of all places, which at 385 million. And how does that link back all to us? I would like to think that we would have some hand in this from our telco provider infrastructure, and then also what we were doing out there in the mobile as far as mobile device management and all things EUC. But just a fascinating thing. And for those of us, because we do have that international audience that are out there, so there is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, as we like to call it here in the U.S., that does every 3 years sends out a cell phone test to all devices that are out there that are on any cell provider networks. And today was that day. But some random trivia there, sir. I am doing well. It is unseasonably warm here in central Pennsylvania for the beginning of October. How are things out there on the West Coast? How are you doing, sir? And what is the color of the bay?
Things are going well. Silicon Valley is starting to jump and hop again with the AI ML boom that's happening with NVIDIA and a bunch of different startups and investments. And even Raghu sent out mail talking about how we're seeing a resurgence in on-prem data center requests from enterprises because AI ML is just, booming. So it's booming out here in the Bay Area. I feel like a little buzz is happening pre-2019 kind of scenario. So that's kind of cool. The weather is cold. It was cold last week. We had a storm come through and it was in the 50s and 60s. So, cold by our standards. But today is nice and warm. We got another warm front coming through. So it's going to be 90 degrees this week somewhere. So we're going to pop up into the, warm weather. So back and forth, but Colored Bay is just a nice, solid, smooth green right now. No wind. People are out selling this weekend. People are enjoying the bit of a summer that's hitting us near the end of the season. So happy about that. Did a final barbecue. We'll talk a little bit about the barbecue report at the end of the podcast. And with that, Matt, we're going to get to talk about VMware code and the history of VMware code. We're kind of doing some, bring some of the old people back as we transition out of being a VMware Inc. and being Broadcom Inc. So, we're getting old guests in, talk about programs, and also we got the hackathon coming up, and we did one in the US. It was a lot of fun. We've got a great one for Europe. So if you're in Europe, you're listening to this, join a team because the venue is super cool. It's going to be a great off-campus venue like we did back in 2018. Maybe Tim remembers that. And we thought we'd bring some of the old guys in that ran, and gals, guys, whatever, they all ran VMware code at various times. We got Marius, Tim Bonneman, Kripa, and I don't want to say last names. I'll let you guys. And now Brian Graff, who's taken over the program as well. So we thought we would just bring everybody in and chat. So Matt, any other things that we should talk about? Maybe explore. We're all going to explore. Things are paid for. Hackathons paid for. Community booth, dual theaters, code, and VMTN. Alistair's going to be recording sessions. Code Labs. What else we got going on?
If someone is interested in the hackathon, is there a registration process? How does one sign up to participate if they're going to explore?
Yeah, just look for just search on Twitter code. We've been tweeting out the reg links for the last, 2 to 3 weeks. It's been on social. There is a reg link on it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I'll get it while we're
and we also we'll have a blog post out here in the next couple of days as well that has that, and it'll talk about the Barcelona hackathon as well with all the links involved.
So stay tuned for that information and check the VMware code X handle, I guess that we're calling it now, the artist formerly known as Twitter, for further information and whatnot for that.
You know, Matt, I got used to calling VMworld now Explorer, but this exceeds my renaming quota, you know, for the decade. So like catch me in 10 years and maybe I'll start calling it X, but for now I'm just going to keep calling it Twitter, right? I don't care. I can't do it. There you go. All right.
Here we are.
Yeah, no comments from the peanut gallery. Let's get to the code program, and let's introduce Marius. Apparently Marius is a B master from IBM as well, so he's got his name up here. Marius, we go back a long way, maybe 10 years ago when we started the VMware Code. Why don't you do a little introduction? Who are you? How long? What does your career arc look like? You get a minute or two to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into the code a little bit.
Sure. I'm Marius Charte. I'm currently responsible for the IBM community ecosystem. I like to poke fun with the B Master thing because it fits in the IBM ecosystem really well. And then everybody that knows me, I'm connected to Bs, and somehow I managed through my career to get every single manager or every single person that was my manager into beekeeping, including you, Eric. So I thought it's kind of like appropriate to have that here. My little career, always involved with, communicating to a large group of people. Actually, Tim, who is on the same broadcast here, taught me everything I wanted to know or needed to know on how to communicate to user groups and users. That sort of got me interested in the community world. Did that at Oracle for about 5 to 10 years. Then at VMware under your leadership, Eric, and now running the community ecosystem at IBM. Still looking back at the great times that we had with code. I think it was a super cool time to start a code program, and I recall the early conversations we had, on the naming it and how do we get developers involved. Interesting enough, all the same things that we were talking about back then are relevant today, right? Nothing really has changed from the need of developers to be up to speed on the latest development, so to speak. And I think developers need programs like code to have an edge.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll get to Tim and Kripa and Brian to see how this morphed. When we started it, VMware Code, I remember our VP, Jeff Spicer, came and said, how come we don't have a developer program? And I said, well, we've got like a automation program. Developer.vmware.com was a community under the community section. And I think Jeff Spicer was like, but we should have a developer program. And at the time, I'm like, we don't do developers. VMware does, automators, right? We're kind of tailing around. We had developers that were building vSphere plugin architectures, right? So vSphere has a plugin architecture, and you can write code that'll plug into vSphere, right? And that's true developer. You're writing C, C++, for whatever language you build those plugins in. I think it was C. And so we had some developers, but literally those developers were like 500 or less, right? But then Kubernetes started coming up, and DevOps showed up, and we decided that, well, we needed a developer community to interact with DevOps engineers who interact with developers. And so we kind of started out code as a formal developer program, if I remember right. Like we were actually
we started you already. Yeah, if I remember, you already had like the DevOps piece sort of off the ground. There must have been like a previous VMworld or something where you kind of started educating your audience. You did something on DevOps, and then the conversation started about cloud native development, right? So how do we leverage this Kubernetes infrastructure to do cloud native development and modernize the whole development cycle? And obviously that was a part of DevOps, but that was the hot new field. And there was a VP there, I forgot his name, that had some VMware and cloud native application program that we kind of like embraced, and that is what got us off the ground.
Yeah, Kripa, you might remember, was it Daniel or somebody over in the engineering side of cloud?
It was a young VP, all I remember.
Yeah, a very
young guy. Anyways,
yeah,
well, 10 years ago.
Yeah, and that's where it started. And I think at the time that was when we started doing meetups with a guy, Eric Nelson, or David Nelson, I think it was, that owned a meetup group that was talking to developers. And so we started doing meetups in Prom, if I remember right. And I think that you got us connected with I think it's Nelson or Nielsen, David Nielsen or whatever. That's meetup.
I think it's David. He still does meetups. I don't know now. I think he's in Redis, but I'm not entirely sure where he is currently. What I remember from those days was the fun part that we had, Eric, convincing VMware facilities to allow us to do meetups. And I think when I first approached you on like, hey, we need to do this, and why don't we do it in the awesome VMware campus? You were saying like, yeah, let's do it. And then I asked, and then we got just a bunch of no, cannot. You're a little bit of a renegade. So, and we both don't like to hear the word no. And I think we just did it. I think we forced the issue, and then we got a little bit in trouble, but by forcing the issue, we eventually got permission to do them more on a regular cadence. But it was a tough going in the beginning.
Yeah, I remember it helped because Robin Matlock was our CMO, and she was a friend. I've been working with her for like 10 years, and she'd been to my house. She knew my kids. My wife knew her. So we had kind of a friendlier than normal relationship. So I kind of had the air cover of I could do no wrong, because if it really got bad, they would always escalate it up to some SVP, which was our CMO, and she would just go, "Oh, leave Eric alone." And then she'd come say, "Will you stop doing this kind of stuff?" And I'd be like, "No." And she goes, "All right, well, whatever." So then we switched to Tim Bonneman. So Tim, I know that you joined. I think Marius got an opportunity to go with Jeff Spicer and go work at IBM, right? And which you're still there, Marius, running communities there. Yeah. So I think you recommended Tim. Tim, I forget where you came from, but Tim Bonneman, why don't you say hello? Tell us a little about what you do in your career.
Yeah, so my community career started, so I moved to the States in 2005, and then inspired by the then big buzz, which was Web 2.0, I traveled back to Germany and started one of the largest and longest running meetups on current web technologies and startup culture in German-speaking Europe, and then got a chance with Marius at Oracle to play with some of these new things that were popping up, both on the technology side and the event side, community-driven formats, unconference, bar camps, things like that, to infuse those into the Oracle marketing group, and that was fun. And then tried my own thing for a few years, and then moved back into doing this work at VMware first, which was super exciting for code. Did a quick stint at Equinix. I don't know if anyone knows Equinix, and then actually also moved to IBM. So worked on the IBM community team for 3 years, and then most recently got invited to join IBM Research to start a new community on open source and science, which is also super cool. So I've been for the past year at IBM Research.
I would say I was mentioning to Marius yesterday when I was talking about coming on the show that I'm actually really impressed with what IBM is doing between the Red Hat acquisition and getting in the open source space truly with Red Hat, and then the AI ML presence that they've had. Whether you think they're great or not, they have good traction in brand awareness, right? And I'm sure they're working on things. So IBM feels like it has turned a corner, right? Where I don't see them as just mainframe stuff anymore. Now I see them as, interesting technology. They've always had a really strong research and dev space when it comes to CPU development and storage development and computer science in general. Like it's always been solid. So that must be a fun place to be, and building community. Like I gotta say, that's like, what is new tech around building community? Like I got
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, IBM has been a long time supporter, a big supporter of open source, right, over the years. And then IBM Research, there has been recently a focus on open source, and then most recently, specifically on the AI, right, and how to make AI open source, or at least the various components that drive AI. And so that's, of course, a conversation that is very much ongoing, but there is a definite focus on ensuring that, you know, most of it happens in an open, transparent manner.
Yeah,
so.
It's interesting because transparency around the models, right? You know, and like and the how they're actually making decisions, how the AI engine is actually behaving is actually really interesting. You hear Elon and others, you know, raise red flags and talk about, you know, visibility of the model and what does it actually mean. And his biggest problem with open AI is the fact that they've closed that visibility, right? And then it's corporate driven. So interesting.
Yeah, so I think, and this is why I know IBM on the enterprise side is seen as a trusted source, because we see that the regulations and where the whole sort of like AI conversations is going towards is accountability, right? The decisions that are being made by AI, how are they driven to, you know, and who is accountable for those decisions if an AI makes a decision? And I think those are some of the questions that IBM is tackling, and some of the questions the IBM customers, and I'm sure other consumers of AI have at the same time. And the enterprise level, as you know, Eric, there's different burdens that you have to meet, right? There's the SEC, and it's far more regulated than at the consumer level. So you need to have sort of enterprise-ready solutions. And IBM is super focused in driving some of those solutions, and at the same time, you know, enabling the existing products with AI functionalities, more focused on the automation side. But really, it's about like, how is the decision being made, and how do we ensure the decision is ethical, doesn't show bias, and so forth.
Nice. So Tim, back to you. One other question, and you know, we'll open it up here. Matt, we'll get you involved here. I know you're just listening, but Tim, we transitioned. I'm trying to think. We were doing the meetups. Did we start doing the hackathon with you? Were you involved with hackathons in the early days? Because I think that's where we grew into that, right?
Yeah, we did a couple. We did one in Vegas and then one in Barcelona.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was I think those were ones where we had, I know the ones in Barcelona, I think we had an external venue, right, that we went to,
yes,
right, and had a super cool
Vegas was at whatever the big hotel was. I mean, the big venue, right? And then
I think
Barcelona
we did in the Luxor. Yeah,
I think so. Yes, and then Barcelona was a super amazing offsite.
And
venue.
Those days, if I remember right, William Lamb and I forget his name. His house burned down.
Alan Renouf.
Alan
Renouf.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
Alan
That's
Renouf.
the guy that's house burned down. Alan. He has a beautiful new house, by the way, so it's all good, right? Well, it wasn't good for him for 3 years, but Anyway, Alan and Tim came, and I think they set up servers back then, right? And we actually had servers running in the hackathon where, you know, hackers could connect to ESXi full-blown stack servers. It was kind of it was cool back then. I think we spent a lot of time.
I may have helped carrying gear, but I wasn't setting them up. But yeah, we did set up infrastructure so that the stuff could run on site.
Yeah,
that was still.
Those were some of the best days of the hackathon, because we actually spent budget enough to buy servers and, you know, provisioned them, and William sat around provisioning 8 or 9 servers for each team. And then we got in, and I remember one of the things, we got in and we set up our own Wi-Fi to these servers, and nobody could get to them, right? Like we had to actually run a hard line. It was best laid plans, where all of a sudden, you know, 120 people got into that. And I think also back then we also had courses. We actually had instructors that we actually rented rooms, and we actually did instruction in, I think, Vegas, where you could go and sit and learn about the topic of the day. And one of them was how to program Alexa, right? One of the guys had done some really kind of cool code to use voice Alexa to connect to vSphere or something like that, it did session. So it was like an all afternoon. It started at 6, had courses, then you got to hack. It was fun. It was good days. right?
It was good parties. I mean,
Yeah.
people busy
Yeah.
working, but having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
Eric, even during my days, we did the first hackathon. We hacked it all together, and Alan had, I want to say, the price was something like signature. Like he built like a little server that he signed personally, and that is what we gave away. I don't totally, and all I remember is that it went all night, which was insane. Because why would you be up all night? But we did that, and we had Red Bull in a different room and food the whole night, and yeah, it was
it
pretty
has
crazy.
Yeah, it was. It has been, and it was, different, but also the same. And I think Alan and William really did spend time with the gear, right? And back then, I think we had budget to buy gear, so we built gear. So that was kind of cool. So good times there. And then I think by the time Tim and we were probably up to 8,000 members that we had signed up in the DB, right? Like, and we still had hackathon. There was still 120 people would show up through the hackathon, but the program started getting big enough that we actually had real people, and we switched into doing, I think, Marius, we started doing live streams, right? Back in the meetup days in prom, where we got a camera crew. I'm trying to think who live streamed it. Julie Klaus maybe, or somebody came, set up camera crew and actually live streamed it.
Yeah, I think that was later on, like when I was doing code.
All right. Yeah, maybe so. I know then we started doing power sessions. So Kripa, that now Tim, you last like a year and a half, year or something like that. We tried to get a director slot for both Marius and Tim so they could stay on the program, because they're both senior, they're well paid, and the position really should be a director slot running the code program. And at the time, our CMO said, nope, not going to fund it, not going to give you a director slot. You know what you can have? You can have a college new hire take over you can have a college new hire rec. And Tim was like, yeah, that's not going to work. Right. I'm gone. Right. And so we lost Tim, and we got a college rec, and we used it because that's all we had. And we hired Kripa, and that enter Kripa. And Kripa, I remember interviewing you, and I said, do you code? And she's like, no, but I'm going to take a class. Right. I'm definitely going to, she got a business degree, if I remember right, from Santa Clara SCU or something. So, and then you joined, right? So they welcome to you. And I think that was almost like that started, William Lamb and I were interested in ARM, and we started messing with the ARM systems, and somebody ported ESX to ARM. And so that started the ARM days and the Raspberry Pi days. And then Bill Roth showed up and started adding sensors to the Raspberry Pi ARM ESX. And so that got us into the sensor days. And I think that's when we had the meetups, we did live streams. So Kripa, before we start, we'll give you, what's your, you're at VMware. For people that haven't heard of you, just doing a 1-minute elevator pitch.
Yeah, well, I mean, Eric did a great job aging me really quickly. So most of my career arc has involved Eric. I started on Eric's team as an intern when I was a sophomore in college. And that first summer I met Marius. Marius was doing code. So I've actually overlapped with both Marius and Tim, because the second summer that I came back to do my internship again, Tim was managing code. So I think that second summer really was when I got interested in the code stuff, because we were working with the Alexa and AI integrations like a lot. And I thought that was really cool. And I was doing social media marketing, and I wanted to do something a little bit more technical. And so Eric was like, I mean, all right, whatever, like, let's take a chance. Let's do it. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Like, when I joined, there's already a meetup that was set up in Prom C. And I remember, like, 21, like, fresh out of college, high heels on, my dress on. I walked into Prom C, and I looked, and it was like 40 people in sweatsuits. And I walked out really quickly, and I was like, oh no, I'm in the wrong place. And Eric was like, no, that's the meetup. And very quickly got my head screwed on straight about what the next few years is going to look like. But yeah, it was a great 4 years on Eric's team doing code.
Yeah, it is fun to get to learn to see what coders are, and and the guys that are at that time, Kubernetes started becoming real. Google, we had the Google engineers come do sessions, right? A couple of the founders of Kubernetes came and did a session or two on it. I remember that, and we had some of the kind of the we didn't have Tanzu at the time, but the Kubernetes ecosystem and the DevOps Kubernetes ecosystem started to develop. And so then we had them come in and start working that. And now the program started accelerating, because we went from having maybe, under 10,000 to, I remember our goals were 15,000, 20,000. And over that course, that 4 years, I think we ended up at 22,000, members in either email program. We also started doing PowerShell sessions, and we called them power sessions, right? And this is where the program, I think, started to transition from code developers to really focusing on automation, right? And automating the data center, and whether it's YAML files over on Kubernetes, or whether it is PowerShell, automating, or whether it's Python, because the vSphere have all the Python APIs now for everything. So it started to become automating less developers and more automation engineers. Then there was the Amazon reInvent years, right? Where we went to Amazon reInvent for 2 years, and we did the Raspberry Pi code session, ESXi, Dell sponsored roadshow, where we went a couple of years to.
Yeah, I feel like I got lucky with when I got handed code. Like, Tim and Marius had done a really great job of setting a good foundation. And by the time I was managing it, leadership saw a use case and understood like why we were doing code. So then the first 2 years is just all about like building the brand and getting people to recognize that VMware Code was a brand. So we did a lot of trade shows, and literally like we had like those build a booth things, like booth in a box. And Eric would delegate and I would build. And we'd be at these like 200 person conferences. And like the next week would be at reInvent when there's like 14,000 people. We were just really working on spreading the word and getting people to come. And once people saw how great the program was and all the different ways that they could learn, I think that's really when it branched off into being more automation focused.
Yeah, and I don't know, Tim or Marius, when did we start doing VMware Code sessions at Explore, where we had theater sessions plugged into the schedule builder? Was that you, or was that a Crippa time?
Yeah, I think 2018. We definitely did them in 2018. That's the first year that I.
Yeah, I think that we named our sessions from the meetup days when we were live streaming them. We were like, okay, we need a name for these things, right? Like, because they were just like code sessions. And we thought PowerShell, power sessions. So we went, okay, we'll name these things power sessions. And so we named them power sessions. And Amazon was doing a developer program where they would send out a calendar of all the live stream sessions that were happening per quarter. And then you could see when they were going to be. So me and you worked on a calendar of sessions, and we started doing monthly sessions, right? Like that's when we kicked off monthly live stream sessions. Then we realized we could put these at Explore also, and why don't we see if we can get a theater for Explore? And we did get a code theater for Explore, and then we would invite all the people that did power sessions throughout the year to Explore at the end of the year, where they could then get in Schedule Builder, and that's kind of where we have been working from now, right? Like that's where it go. And because we were doing sessions, they were very automation centric. The meetups were definitely dev topics, developer topics in the early 2016, 2017, 2018. They were developer topics where we had Google engineers, topics that I didn't even understand at the time. And Tim and Marius were good at that, right? Like when Tim and Marius left, the code program shifted to automation much more so than when Tim and Marius was there. And now we've hired Brian, right? Because Marius, you went, got your master's, and then came back, and you were too good for us, and you went and got a real tech marketing job doing brainy stuff, right? Instead of running around doing Raspberry Pi stuff. But
are you talking about me?
Yeah,
Oh.
I'm talking about you going off, getting your master's, leaving the program kind of half there, then coming back, and then finally taking a real job over in tech marketing, right? Like,
yeah, I guess I didn't do a very good introduction. Yeah, so I'm still at VMware, but now I'm in the end user computing business unit, doing technical marketing.
Right. And then finally, we convinced our leaders to give us a director slot for the program. And then this will finally, we'll open it up. We're like halfway through here. So we'll get to let Matt come in and we'll just chat a little bit. So about what's happening with the automation space, the developer space, but we finally convinced our leadership. I got a new VP, we got a new CMO, and we convinced our leadership to open up a director slot for the VMware Code program. And when we were thinking about who we would want to get, we were like, yeah, we want to get somebody that knows automation really well. And Brian, before I get to Brian and let him tell his story, Brian was claimed to fame from my perspective of an automation engineer that helped build the PowerShell API posters, right? And I don't know if you did that or whether that was like you and in combination with a couple other people, but you were known as a PowerShell guy, right? And there was only one other guy that he left and went to the DB. Who is the Fear the Beard?
Kyle Ruddy.
Kyle Ruddy was the only other really master Jedi PowerShell, guy, and so that's why when Brian showed up, we were excited about getting him on board to run the code program, because for me, it is now it's a developer program ish, but it's really an automation program. And that's the way we look at it. So Brian, welcome to the podcast. And you've been in now running code for maybe 4 or 5 months. I don't know how long it's even been now, maybe 3 or 4 months, but
3
months. It feels like 7 years since time slows down in the land of Broadcom acquiring us kind of scenario. But Brian, give us a little bit of your history. You got a minute or two, and then we'll kind of open it up and talk about where we're going.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So a little bit of background on me. I started out as an intern in college doing automation. I was an engineering communications, what would you call it? Communications engineer. And I was in charge of BlackBerry Enterprise Server, SharePoint, Exchange, and dealing with about 100,000 mailboxes. I quickly learned that I needed to automate. And so that's when I first started getting into PowerShell. Eventually, when I wound up at VMware, I got to work under Alan Renouf, and he kind of helped mentor me a bit on the Power CLI side of things. And I was able to co-author a Power CLI reference book with some of the great minds from the community, and they definitely helped lift me up and carry me for a lot of that. And I wouldn't say that I'm any expert. I just got lucky with certain roles and visibility. But we had some Power CLI posters that started that got handed off to me. I created one or two of the versions, and then Kyle Ruddy created the next. So I was at VMware for 6 years doing technical marketing around PowerShell, Power CLI, ESX lifecycle automation, and then switched over to be a product manager for DRS and HA. Helped release about 6 different features there, and then came back to technical marketing to help launch VMware Cloud on AWS, and went to AWS for 4 years. So I was at VMware for 6 years, went to AWS for another 4, and found this role. And prior, when I was at VMware, I was a part of the VMware Code community. I knew Kripa fairly well, and she was doing a great job with the community. And I was very heavily focused on vMugs when I was in tech marketing. So when I saw this role open and I saw Eric, and I'd worked with Eric and been on some of these podcasts in the past, it all just felt like a good fit, having done some of these presentations, helping with code, helping with hackathons, and having a lot of that scripting history. And so I was fortunate enough to get hired on to lead the code program.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good summary, and excited to have you here and like all of that. So opening it up, I guess I'll ask anybody who wants to chime in here and talk about where do we think the community around automation and code in general is going. So we got Tim with open source, right? And Matt, I don't know if you want to take a moment and just share any kind of thoughts you have around anything here. I'm just opening up, going there's interesting things to see how all of this is coming about. Open source, GitHub, community sharing, automation cloud? Like, where do we think any of this or all of this is going over time?
I'm going to take a sidestep here for a minute, given the Hollywood squares of resources that we have on today's episode, and ask everyone, because there's so much experience here across a broad range of major players, is what's the common element that makes a good community? And what do you see that from the user groups and communities that you've been involved with throughout these organizations, that are, it's like that common component or components, plural, that really make a good community stand out and run and operate well? And I'll throw that out to just the panel in general, if anybody wants to pick up on that.
I'll take a quick stab. So based off of my time at VMware and what I did at AWS, I think that there's two main pieces to a community. I think the first is a feeling of acceptance. People aren't going to go out of their way to try new things or ask questions where they feel like they may be judged, or people may look at them and be like, that's a dumb question. And I think that's something that VMware has fostered really well within the vMUG community, especially, of having an area of acceptance where everyone's on a different journey, everyone's at different positions in the path, or locations in their journey, but everyone's accepted. And when you have that level of acceptance, then people start participating more, right? People start volunteering, people try things, people may mess up, but if you can have that first foundational step there of, I don't want to call it a safe space, but a familial space where people feel comfortable, everything else kind of starts to fall into place on top of that, and people can start building those relationships.
Totally. And just going off of what Brian said, I think that that safe space really does help with engagement. And I think there's lots of communities that exist where people aren't really engaged. And I think that with everyone who's here on this podcast, all of us have made an active effort to engage with our community. It's not just putting on events, it's chatting on Slack, it's being at the events themselves. And I really do think that's something that we're great at VMware.
All right, let me give you my 2 cents on brand communities, not quite the communities you guys are necessarily talking about, but when you're building brand communities, my formula always has been trying to find out what exchanges I can have between the users and the brand. What does the brand want, and what does the brand can give, and what does the community want and what they can give? Simple examples would be community has questions, the brand may have answers. That's a great exchange. The community may have insight. The brand may want to have insight into the products. That's another great exchange, right? So if you're looking into what exchange can happen between the brands and the community, then you can find out all these little programs and value propositions that go both directions. And that's usually what drives then engagement. If you don't have any idea of what the audience wants, it's going to be very hard for you to have a community, and vice versa. If the audience does not know what you want from them, then it's also kind of why am I here?
Well, I think to build on top of that, one of the easiest ways to wreck a community, I think, is breaking that trust and potentially, for example, pushing marketing down into a community where people are coming together to do things. When you're building a brand, you can have examples, you can have samples. You should be giving a lot more, probably a 10-to-1 ratio of giving to asking. And I think generally speaking, when you build that up and you make things easier for these people, for their work, their life, for automation, for example, if we make things easier for them to complete their jobs, they have potentially a better experience in their job, which potentially leads to a better emotional state of being. They take that back home. They have a better home life. It all kind of adds in together. But once somebody comes into the community from the brand and asks too much, or comes in with something that kind of clashes with what that community is, it can very quickly and easily break things. So there's a very fine balance when you're building these communities, in building up that trust and setting expectations throughout the community of each person's role potentially
And
it
that's
is.
why we have a job.
Yeah.
And well,
That's why we are community managers. That's what we do. Without us, you will not get balance.
Yeah, well said. I think that's what I was going to bring up is you make sure to get out of the way just enough, right? These people are very often, if you have in corporate settings, these topics, you have very passionate people that care deeply about the stuff that they try to accomplish. And if you can just facilitate and have them co-create this space and just get out of the way and then be mindful about getting your piece of the pie when the time is right. I think that's the key to making sure you create something that lasts and yields value in the long term.
Yeah, I find that community is a little bit like a cake. You need a little of everything. If you don't have any sugar, and I look at the brand and the marketing people, it's kind of like the sugar, right? Like it makes it taste good, and you need money to do these kind of things. And so a healthy community has enough sugar that it keeps rolling, and you get to do things, and that's good. But then at the same time, you need flour, which is the people that are generating content. And Marius, to your point, you need people that want to eat the cake, right? Like in the end, we've been blessed at VMware because VMware's products are complicated, and you generally need help in order to use VMware's products efficiently and effectively. And data centers are complicated, so you have to have that need for the information. To Marius's point, so you have to figure out the value prop. You have to have the need and the want. I've seen a lot of people that try to create communities, and I'm like, you don't need a community here because there's nothing you need to learn. There's nothing you need to do. I guess you can have a community to like a women's coffee club or something, or I don't want to pick on women. My wife does these things, and they have a community, but they just chat, right? And so you can have a chat community that's just fun to chat. But if you have that need, for sure, then you have to have smart people like Brian's and Tim's and Marius's and maybe even Kripa and Matt. We'll say everybody. You need to have the smart people, the flour, and you need a little spice. I think Kripa comes in and brings a lot of energy, and it makes it fun and it makes it taste good because you got a little bit of seasoning in the mix. And then you have to have some sugar, right, from the brand and from the company, and you put that all in a pot and you make a cake, and it turns out pretty good. And if you're missing any one of those elements, if you don't have good flour, you don't have good content, and then you need people that want to eat the cake or whatever you're building, there has to be a value prop to it. So that's my 2 cents.
And I think that to build on this, and this is also to what Brian is mentioning. I think people in general, when you ask them to join in and the value proposition makes sense, they will, right? That's why you guys have a VMware expert program, and you can name X amount of people that are willing to jump in and help you bake that cake. The reason they're doing that is because they feel like they want to be part of that process. And if the balance is right, their value could be simply that they're part of the process. And we see that at IBM through IBM Champions. We had that at Oracle with Oracle Aces. So it's finding those right people that want to do something for the greater good almost. And I know there's no greater good specifically in writing a piece of code, but they do feel like they're part of that process and they did something together. And that feeling is what communities kind of capitalize on and build upon, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting because I look at William Lamb and Alan Renouf, and I'd have to actually invite them too, because they brought the flour. They were the guys that were actually bringing really heavy content into the community as well. And you need those people, to talk about what's actually happening. Yeah, it is. It is interesting.
And some more of energy, I do want to give Kripa a little more credit here. There were a couple of other interns, sorry to go right back to the beginning, and I had a lot of fun in those days because we had a little bit of, in credit to you, Eric, you kind of give us a little bit of a carte blanche on like what to do, as long as we didn't break any major rules or got in major troubles. You were kind of like, go do something fun. And we came up with a lot of fun little ideas. To your point, a little spice, a little bit of like extra that was added in the community that made everything sort of like jive.
I think there's also just a piece of, I like people that are willing to lift, roll up their sleeves and get in. Kripa said it, like, go to the event, set up a booth, right? Like we get mileage out of the budget we do get because we take that and then, I think we bought, a booth set, and we were at AWS reInvent, and we got there, and the lady with the headset, running around going, okay, where's your team? Where's the builders? When is your build? We're like, me, Kripa, and a couple other people were like, yeah, and then we're like reading directions on this booth, trying to figure out where to plug A into C, and we never built a booth before, and it's like the day before the event, and there's people with hard hats and forklifts, and we're sitting rolling our stuff in and trying to figure out how to build it. But that's kind of like, those are for me the best communities, is when you get people like Marius and Tim and Brian who like to do heavy lifting for the community and then organizing, and everybody else sees that, and then they go, yeah, all right, we'll do that. Community podcast every Wednesday, routine. We're going to do it. We're going to lift. We're going to roll up our sleeves. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, but it is work. I got a question, Matt. You asked one. Maybe I'll give you another one. But for me, how do you guys see community? Do you see community changing with the cloud environment? Like, I know VMware we're changing because of Broadcom and that kind of stuff, but like the cloud environment's also changing. SaaS services. I guess you got to find a product that still needs that value prop. And I'm wondering, in the cloud world, do we still see that value prop, or do we all go play open source, or do we play other places? Where do you guys see some of this stuff heading when we add in the complexities of software development and cloud these days?
I'll go ahead. I didn't want to jump in, be the first again, but since there was an awkward 2-second silence, I think that there's two interesting aspects of this. If you break it down, there's always going to be new technology. There's always going to be those that are interested in going towards the latest and greatest and the shiny object. I think a lot of us have the shiny object syndrome, where we like to tinker with new things. But one thing that I've seen that doesn't seem to change is that there's always going to be, I'd say, two different groups of individuals and communities. You've got those who are kind of intermediate/experts, who are fairly seasoned and who will potentially graduate out of whatever community they're currently in and go towards kind of the next big thing, right? Whether that's cloud or AI, or, there's a whole list of different technologies out there that people can get excited about. But then you also have this other half, or maybe I'd call it maybe the 85% of people who are brand new, or who are just starting out in this journey. With automation, one of the biggest things I saw when I would go and present at conferences was the majority of people in the room every single time had never automated anything because they were scared that they were going to break something at scale. They were scared of creating a resume generating event. And so for that reason alone, they did everything in the UI. And so I think that we have kind of in these communities, those that are a little, maybe a little more cautious jumping into a community or jumping into a certain type of technology, and they'll tend to kind of stay there or graduate from beginner to intermediate over time. And then you have that second group of people that are always, they're the ones that are going home at night and tinkering for 3 or 4 hours and moving on. And so in terms of things changing, I don't really see that much change going on right now. We still have kind of those proportions. I think the biggest change is those that have been involved in the community for a long time. We're starting to see them diving into some of the other technologies as well.
Matt, you were at a VMUG UserCon the other day.
I was at the most attended to date UserCon up in Boston. We had over 300 individuals. I think the last tally that I got was 308, 310 at Boston so far. So it was a great event for those that were able to get up there.
Yeah, I think that I'm with Brian on my own question, which is, I still like building machines. I still like graphics cards. I still like hardware. So I think I'll always be in a community that's not that far away from systems, hardware. And last time I checked, you still need computers to run things, whether they're in the cloud, racked in a rack somewhere, or you need storage. You need all this technology, and you still got to somehow make it all work, whether it's sitting in a cloud and you're figuring out how to use it, or whether you're racking and stacking it. I think that and Brian, I think there's a classification of your community, like 80% versus 20%. There's some percentage like me that once I get into something, I just never I just like, oh, that's it. I like it. And I like it more. And like there's one old grizzly guy left that knows how to automate using PowerShell, and there'll be like Kyle Reddy there, and he's got a big white beard, and he's still automating it. These guys never stop. The IBM 360 JCL programmers are still out there somewhere making $280 an hour because nobody else knows how to do it. So there are community guys that just never let go of the tech they've learned because they love it. And there's always a market slice that'll exist there to keep using that tech. So some of these people will be like that. But Matt, to your point, this tech is still very valid, and you still got on-prem stuff going on. So I have a little bit of a story here, and forgive me for the background, but we've had this individual on the podcast prior. So the gentleman's name is Carl Webster. And within the EUC community, Carl has always been a fairly big deal. He maintains a script repository that was out there for a lot of automation. He's well known within the Citrix user group, our VMUG EUC user group, and just EUC community in general. But outside of that, one of the things that Carl has been heavily involved in is Lions Club, so Lions Club International. And to that point, he wrote, and I would encourage anyone to go out there, and this is not an ask for plug by any means, but I think that this is important for any community member that's out there, or community leaders, especially our VMUG leaders. And he does something that's called an autopsy of a Lions Club. And he goes through and he literally writes an obituary of why certain individual Lions Clubs in the United States have failed. And one of the analyses that he comes up with, of many, is that, let's say, a younger generation of folks are looking to not just join a group, but they're looking for more of a project. In other words, that they're more service-oriented. So again, taking that step back and maybe even extrapolating above and beyond that, what are some of the trends that this group sees from the time that you had started with being involved with communities, where you've had to pivot significantly based on the demographics, not necessarily just the tech, that are coming into these groups?
All right, I'm indirect. I'm not going to really answer the question, but I'm going to give a comment, because I don't know, it's a tough question, and I don't know that I really made the pivot, because I feel like the community basics that I have learned throughout the years can be applied to any group, and you can build community around that. But two things that I want to comment on. Number one, on what Eric's mentioned, like they're always going to be a crowd that does certain things. Like I come from IBM, we have a COBOL crowd, right? I don't know how many people code in COBOL these days, but believe it or not, COBOL run mainframes. Mainframes run banks. Banks run millions of dollars of business. Not going to go away any day soon. And one of the, tying it now back to AI, which I think will be a pivot for community managers at some point, because it answers one of the needs community have, which is knowledge. I think AI can provide that better than humans in a very short period from now forward. And one of the AI tools that IBM has launched is actually to translate COBOL into Java, right? So you modernize your apps by, here's that code. Nobody knows how to write COBOL anymore, to some of the point. And maybe still one person out there that kind of knows, but majority doesn't. It still runs things. And how do we actually now bring it into the next era? So AI is doing that, and I think AI will play a major role in how communities are being built going forward. Now, I don't know that this answers your question, but certainly that's a pivot that I need to make, is to incorporate AI in community building.
Yeah, I agree. I think I haven't had to pivot recently. The current project, open source science, I'm working on, we are lucky in a way that the mission behind a lot of this open source is solving the pressing challenges of the time, right? Whether it's cancer or climate or so. When we get developers excited about contributing to science, there is this kind of do good mission, and because it's open source, there's a hands-on aspect to it, so you can actually contribute code to some cool projects. So, but yeah, in terms of big trends, I think AI is gonna change a lot how the job of the community leaders and the job of the community managers. Even though, like, I agree
Community
with Brian,
managers.
with the managers, right? The fundamentals haven't really changed. You still have these different 80-20 rule. You still have the same dynamics, but I think the tools that we're going to have at our fingertips to just be better at our job, I think, are going to be amazing. So that's starting, and people are playing with a lot of things all around. So that's
there's one guy that does code labs on occasion, and he's an engineer, but he's an awful writer, right? He can't write anything. And in the last 6 months, the quality of work that has come from this guy, in the community is like 10 times better. So I reached out to him like, hey, what happened to you? Like, man, your stuff is like 100 times better. Anything that you've now touched looks really professional. He goes, yeah, I just use ChatGPT for everything now, right? It enabled him to be effective in a piece that he could write code, but couldn't share it, right? Couldn't really put a PowerPoint deck together. And and I look at that, and I just a simple instance of being able to write better, right? And then submit better writing on what you're actually submitting. I could see that, starting to make a difference.
Yeah, it's a great tool for managers to get upset about people that work for them. Like Eric, I have a good example because you're like a social media as well. Somebody worked for me, didn't really want to do the work in social media. And I literally just go to ChatGPT and say, like, write me 20 tweets on this. And I'd send it person, here's the 20 tweets. Can you please just do it? Right. It's kind of like it's and I'm being not, that's kind of like pushy. I know it's not a great example, but this thing that's going to change. Communication is much easier through AI, right. And we can provide much faster the right answer to our community members that are looking for help. So if one of our core missions in the community is to help our users, why wouldn't we use tools that enable that help to be more efficient and more accurate over a long time?
That's people that are language challenged in particular, right? This where the LLMs, large language models, right? It's gonna do a lot for them, right? Yep.
Yeah. So that we need all to pivot. How that looks, Matt. That's basically back to the thing. We all need to pivot on that.
But I'm also a little worried that it'll take the individuality out of the community experience, right? If everybody has perfect English or perfect writing, and it turns out that it's collective beehive thinking, right? Everybody's going to be doing the same thing. I don't know if that's going to work either, right? So it'll be interesting. Well, I think the pendulum has swung way over here. Oh my gosh, it's great. But I think there might be an issue here as well.
But I think, if we look at it from a different perspective, one of the things that I was doing just a couple of days ago was I was working with some code that I found on GitHub from someone else's repository, but it was in a different coding language than what I was using. And so I was able to actually take part of that module, and I could have gone through and rewritten it for myself manually, but I took it and I threw it into ChatGPT and said, convert this Python script to PowerShell, for example. And it was about 90% accurate. I had to go in and change a few things, but overall, it saved me 4 or 5 hours worth of work to go in and just touch things up. So I think outside of the communications side, it has a lot of really good potential for helping people code or develop in the way that they are comfortable with or that they've had experience with. And so definitely other opportunities out there, just besides the English language or whatever language we're talking about.
Awesome. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour, and I want to be respectful for everybody's time. We got like a six hourly people here that are burning dollars being here. So, Matt, any final last words before we let everybody go?
I think we need a quick barbecue report.
Oh, I don't know how many barbecue. I know that Tony Foster's gone. All of you guys are, been in California. Brian's up in Utah now, and Kripa's I think in California. We got Pennsylvania. Anybody got any really good barbecue reports still going on?
I recently had a chance to go to Austin for the sci-fi conference, and we like barbecued 4 or 5 times. It was awesome.
I cheated. I went a couple of weeks ago with a dear friend, Cody D'Arkland, who was a VMware employee for quite a while. Yep, he's at Launch Darkly right now. He was in Utah for some business, and we met up and went to a barbecue restaurant here near my town. So it was a little bit of a cheat because neither of us smoked the meats, but we got to catch up over some good smoked food. So
I believe that Cody was the one that did the Alexa coding originally. I think it was him. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Cody D'Arkland. Somebody asked on chat, "Oh, who did that code segment on Alexa programming?" I think it was Cody. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Any other last words? Tony Foster said he did a great smoked ribs and pork loins. I also did 2 slabs of baby back ribs, which were great. So but Austin is the place to go. Tim,
I mean, as a consumer, I didn't make it myself. I just, I just went to it. I didn't make it myself.
No, that's what I say. But I've been to like 5 different places in Austin. When we did like a tour de force of Austin when we were there about a year and a half ago, and I want to throw up barbecue after that. Like their third day, I was like, okay, I can't eat anymore. And then we went to a wedding, and guess what they served? They served barbecue at the Texas wedding, of course. Good times. Well, hey guys, it was great to always work with you guys throughout the years. Good to see you guys again. Stay healthy, stay alive. You guys are all, each of you, a force when it comes to community building, and I've enjoyed time with each of you. So thanks for coming back on the show and doing an old home week on VMware Code. And Brian, as always, we got you in place now. Couldn't have a better leader taking code forward. So, and I'm excited about where we're going over the next year, because I believe the community is a big part of what Broadcom wants to do. So we'll stay tuned. Awesome. Thanks again for everybody, and until we'll be back again next week. Until then, everybody go get some barbecue and have a great weekend.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Good seeing you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.